All right, welcome to seminar 2 or 3, wherever we are in the series. Welcome back for the Frontier Angel Accelerator. We have someone who didn't join us last time, which is Erica from Exchange in the Philippines. She's been here, was on the webinars a while before. And you, Erica, you sent John and I answers to the questions. So I think what we should do this time is we should just dive into that for a little bit, answer look through your answers, question your answers, and then we'll move on to the homework we had from last time.
Great, thank you.
All right, so question one in the questionnaire is how much capital do companies need to operate until they get to the next round or the next milestone or the next year? Your answer was 12 months of runway costs about $100,000.
Right.
Where'd the number come from?
It came from the data that we've been using the last maybe 8 years. So we looked at them, at least for the early stage enterprises that we're looking at, those that are serious about scale, they need about that much for like 1 year's worth of runway.
Who created this data set?
Oh, we did. Our organization did, based on all the different groups that come to us to ask for either funding or incubation or both.
Okay, and what percentage of the companies that are coming to you are finding the $100,000?
Very slim, maybe 10%. Okay. So far, yeah.
10% of how many?
Sorry, so maybe in the last year there are about 30 that we looked at.
So
okay.
30 applied.
About 3, maybe 3.
Need to build 3 or. And what do they spend the money on? How many
people talent usually?
Yeah. So how many people is that?
So it's a mix. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 at the senior level, or a mix of a senior person and then some mid-level.
Okay, and these mostly tech companies, or is this a mix of stuff?
It's a mix. Since we're industry agnostic, so it really depends on what the nature of the business is.
Okay. And remind us what your current program is in terms of length and.
So we do rolling, a rolling program, not by cohort. On average, it's about 5 years for incubation. We give about 50,000 per organization that goes through the incubation program, and that's staggered in the first year. There's usually follow-on funding of about another 50, but we stop at 100.
So how are they surviving for 5 years on 50 if the normal need is 100?
So we help them look for other investors. So we usually have partners who give about as much or a little more, or access to grants, and that's how. So we help them with everything, even with funding.
And is this a habitation kind of thing where everybody's together, or is this distributed?
It's one-on-one typically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving down your answers, you had pretty specific numbers on high net worth individuals. So.
Yeah. So what we did was, there was a study released maybe last year. So they defined high net worth individual as someone who was at least $1 million US. And so all the big banks did the study, and they found that there were only about 30,000 in the total population of the Philippines who met that criteria. Which kind of makes sense given like the average income here is now at about maybe $400 per month for most for a big chunk of the Filipinos, but there's really a big gap. So those are the numbers we're looking at. What's interesting though is the ones who are interested now in funding are now organizations who are usually philanthropic or grant-based and are exploring other models of funding for organizations.
Okay, so there's some potential for some pools of capital that aren't individuals.
Yes, correct.
And they're going to need education too. Yes.
That's like, yes, that's the super tricky part because this is completely new to them.
Okay.
So it's
And how
that's been our challenge.
that's one that didn't show up in our conversation last time.
Mm,
I do tons of work in Africa, and the nonprofit sector is way bigger than like the investing sector. Um,
yeah,
so how is that? Is it the same way in the Philippines?
very similar.
So
Very similar.
there's just billions of dollars flowing around in the nonprofit world, mostly getting wasted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or for example, like if they're looking at one big issue, they just fund one thing as opposed to looking at the entire chain. So that's the other challenge too. It's the whole approach and this. So the approach to the problem and also the approach to funding the problem, to funding the solution for the problem.
Yeah.
So a
Okay.
lot of education needs to happen.
So that's a twist that we may need
Yes.
to deal with in building this program out. Okay. Um,
So
and
I want to appeal at 0.38%. That was using U.S. standards, but the income for people is much, much lower, and so you can be hiring people at a much lower level. So presumably the companies need less. So what does a professional earn? You know, if you're a top of the line programmer or a middle manager at a tech company or a doctor or a lawyer, where are the salary levels for them
Here, I would say starting is about $3,000
a month?
a month,
Yeah.
which is
So
starting. So
30,
a bit,
36.
yeah, so
yes,
yeah, just because the median's down at 400 doesn't mean the professionals are earning
yeah. So if
are
you
more near
right,
400.
and if you're now looking at skill and professionalizing, and you really want to pay for talent, I mean, you're looking at people who are asking for $10,000 a month, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's the only thing. That,
I wonder, you know, we take people who are making a little bit more than 100,000, and we take 5,000 from them each cycle. And
Mhm.
so assumption that I had was that you'd be able to take less and invest less. So rather
Mhm.
than taking 5,000, take 2,000, and it would fit into the
Mhm.
ecosystem. I'm not sure that the numbers are lining up for us yet.
Mm-mm. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, so the kind of the to interpret a little bit. Yeah, you actually went a different way. I thought you were going to go, John. The question, okay, there's 38,000 people who have $1 million in wealth. How many people are earning $75,000 or more a year as a salary? And then could they take, $5,000 a year or $3,000 a year and use that? And are they allowed?
Um, they're allowed, but I think so. So that this also begs the question: like, if they were to invest, what would they invest in? Right? Would they invest in something very high risk, like um, the enterprises we work with, or would they go into something more passive, like property? Or and we're finding like they'd rather invest in property or something more passive and safe.
So we always have this issue about whether they're willing to invest in these other asset classes that they don't understand. But the
Mm,
question is whether or not there's a pool that is large enough that there's enough that we would be able to convince them. So in the United States, we're
right.
only convincing 1%. And
Yeah.
so I'm using those same kinds of numbers. But I think that it would be possible that if you have significant numbers of professionals, which it seems like there are, then there might be people who are earning the 50 to 75,000 where you could take a piece of their income and have that work in a rational way for them as a part of their portfolio. Some of it should go to other asset classes as well, but some part of their
Mhm.
portfolio could go into this,
Yeah,
especially in lieu of nonprofit donations that are going into things that are not progressing as you were articulating.
No, I understand. And I think that's part of the challenge too. First, it's educating a lot of people about this kind of asset class. and then what that whole journey looks like as an investor.
Yeah.
So
Of the
not to say that's impossible, but there's
20, according to Wikipedia, 22 million people who live in the metropolitan area, what percentage are middle class, or living like European middle class?
that's a good question. So in Metro Manila, I would have to double check, but less than half for sure.
Oh, sure. I'm
Yeah,
expecting a
and
number like
like
10% or 15%.
yeah. So somewhere along those lines.
Yeah.
I would have to double check.
Right. So even if it were 5%, that's a million people.
Right.
Right. So part of this is to say, okay, there's the people who have $1 million in wealth. They may not be the target market here. They may be too rich, or they made money some other way. Versus the million-ish people who are probably earning between or at least $50,000 a year. Working professional jobs in Manila. How do we? Then you have a bigger pool. Now we're talking a million people instead of 38,000. And so that's where John's 1/10 of 1% comes in, because 1/10 of 1% of a million, if I get my zeros right, 0.1 is now 1,000 people that are potential investors.
Okay.
All right, moving on to questions. I think everything else we're looking at it. So let's just, I think the homework was basically how do you do investment pools? What's the legal structure? Are there any regulations and legal things in the way? And so you don't have those answers yet?
Oh, so we've been working with our legal team on that, coming from the last conversation we had. And there are a lot of barriers. So aside from a lot of restrictions, you're basically taxed a minimum time you do a transaction. So the cost is so high.
It broke up as you were answering that.
Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, can you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. So we've been exploring different structures, and it looks like there are a lot of restrictions and high taxes. Like every time you just move from one to another, it's like 20%. You get taxed 20%.
Oh, moving.
So
one of these countries where moving money from place to place gets taxed, like investment in a company.
right. Yeah. So for example, one of the easiest or more seamless structures, the minimum tax is about 40%. And we're not sure that a lot of people would be open to losing that much right away off the bat, like from what they give. So anyway, we're looking at different ways of doing it and what's easiest for the investor. And then what's the administrative work required. So we're exploring a couple of options. We should be done by, I think, next week.
Okay, so what you're seeking is the equivalent of the corporate partnership that we have here. We call an LLC, even though that limited liability company, that term gets used elsewhere in the common law countries as something else.
Right.
But it's really a corporate partnership, and in the U.S. it's a pass-through entity in terms of taxes. So it's a corporation that files a tax return but doesn't owe any of those taxes. It just passes it on to its owners. And it may not exist in the Philippines, and it may not exist in Vietnam or Thailand or anywhere else we're talking to. But that's what we use here for funds. And the backup that they use in Africa, for instance, is Mauritius, which is another country that has a tax-free structure that does what this does. And then the question is, do you get taxed moving money in and out of the country? And so the equivalent in Philippines, I presume, is Singapore.
Yeah, that's one. Singapore and Hong Kong.
Yeah. Hong Kong's having some issues at the moment.
Yeah, it's true.
Do you know what the pathway is to form some kind of entity in Singapore and then use that entity to invest in a Filipino company?
We're very familiar. So there are a couple of investments that we have that have a Singapore company attached. So that's another option we're looking at.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Erica. I'm going to switch over to KISS Startup and talk about their research on their legal structure.
Hi, Looney and John.
Hi.
Okay, so actually we do a research about the legal structure to form the angel investor fund in Vietnam. Actually, now Vietnam doesn't have any fixed regulations on forming a fund, angel fund in Vietnam. Um, as So as we wrote, we note down on our homework last session, to the investment star fund is managed in one of the following models. The company manage, they can hire a company to manage their fund, or they will be their fund will be managed by a general meeting of investors and the board of representative of the fund. And another way is to manage by the general meeting of investor and board of representative of the fund and the director of the fund. So in Vietnam, because the investment fund is quite new to the market, so the Vietnam government have not had any fixed regulation on manage the fund. So it's quite new market and quite open to invest for the investor to invest in Vietnam.
Okay. And did you guys find some information on what it would cost to get this going?
Actually, as far as I know, there's only one investment fund has officially launched in Vietnam. So about the cost to operate it, we don't know and have not had any record about the operation cost, but about in terms of the cost to creating a company to manage the fund is cost only from $0 to $10. Yeah, so that's because it's quite new. They have official launch in this year, so we have not had any record about the operation cost.
Which city did the fund in Vietnam get set up in?
Actually, that fund is set up in Hanoi.
So
Yeah, the
I'm
capital.
pretty sure that there is a fund in Da Nang.
In Da Nang, or
Now, let me see if I can find the name of it. I think I connected with him.
Can you tell me? Can you tell us about the fund you mentioned in Da Nang?
Do you remember the name of the fund in Da Nang City?
Yeah, I'm looking it up on my. I connected to the person. Let me see if I can find him.
Yeah.
So I think it might have been Pham Trung.
Pham Trung.
He said he's one of the directors of the Da Nang Business Incubator.
So you mean the so you mean the DNS?
DNS, yes.
DNS, right?
Yeah, they have a fund associated with them. I'm not sure if he's the right guy or not. Let's see. So I have only a few people I talked to in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Zun Ho. TZUNGO, one of the people I talked to.
You meet the Zoom.
I think some kind of name we should type in.
Yeah,
From
I have a
VDP.
terrible accent, don't I? Hold on a second. I'll cut and paste it.
Vice directors. Zoom.
Just wait a minute.
Okay. That's a cut and paste from LinkedIn. I recognize that.
So those were the two people that I talked to in Vietnam, and I'm not remembering which one talked about the fund they were raising. And so they said that they were very early in the fundraising, so might be worthwhile talking to them. Dung from Swiss EP, or actually An from Swiss EP, would probably be a good person to follow up with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks like Keith also knows Mr. Ho.
Phạm Trung. Cái quỹ đấy là quỹ tư nhân không phải quỹ Lionfish. Thì tôi đã hỏi chị.
Because we're not sure about that kind of fund, so we need to cross-check with some of my colleagues to make sure that it is not a kind of private fund. So it maybe it's not belong to DNS.
No, I don't think it is a DNS program, but it's related. It's tied to it. There was a fun conversation underway when I was there in August. In any case, I can do a little bit of hunting for that and see if there's something useful. And it sounds like there's the opportunity to do that kind of work.
So yeah, go ahead.
There is a guy who is in Hanoi who's doing the Founders Institute. Do you know who that is? Bobby Liu?
Yeah, topic of Founder Institute, right?
Yeah. So does Founder Institute ever do conglomerations of investors?
Actually, they create the Accelerator program, and then they invest directly into the startup that graduate from their program.
Okay.
Yeah, but actually until now we haven't know that they create a fund. But recently there are some institute or organization tend to create a fund in next year, but they just they put in their plan but not form the fund yet.
Okay. Well, if they have a plan, then they may be ahead of you on the research. So in general, here in the States, the simplest path from I want to start a fund to having a fund up and running is to befriend another fund manager who's done it before, or two or three. Find out not only what structure they use specifically, but like which lawyer they use. Hire that lawyer, and then you can spin these things up much quicker and cheaper. If you go to your normal lawyer who's never done it before, then it gets to be more complicated and more expensive.
That's exactly what we did to do Seattle Angel Fund.
Yeah, that's what I did to do Fledge in my first fund. I simply went to the law firm that does more funds than anyone else in the country and said, I want one like that. And here are the changes I want to make. Right, I actually done that twice with Fledge. All right. So, I have a feeling this is going to hang over our heads for the next 6 months or so, trying to figure out the details and get these things off the ground.
Yeah.
Worst case, we had a backup plan, just to repeat it from last time, which is do it anyway, but don't do it with a fund. Do it where the investors are making direct investments, but signing some pledge saying that they're going to invest. And then plan C would be partner with a nonprofit and do it some way through them. If you have if there's a nonprofit set of laws in your country.
Well, but ICM is, at least in Vietnam, ICM is working on an angel conference. And so it's likely that they're going to be working on the same set of questions.
Yeah, but we have the Philippine problem too with the taxes.
Yeah, that one's a little more complex.
So it may wind up being direct, and you charge a fee to them to run the program, and then they invest directly.
Yeah.
But probably if you turn over enough rocks, you'll find a fund that's already up and running that solved this problem, and it's a matter of networking your way over there to figure out how they did it. Right there, the fund structures, even in the States, are not obvious. If you've never done one before, don't know anyone who's done one before, it's not obvious at all how to start a fund.
Yeah. Actually, this year we tend to integrate the Angel Conference into the national annual event for startup community called TechFest. But actually, until now, we wonder whether we should to integrate into that program, or we create it by our own.
So there's a couple of issues. One of the issues is that the conference is not a competition, it's a 6-month program. And so there's a whole bunch of work ahead of time. And so aligning those tends to get much harder than you think it will be. The second thing is that if you do it correctly, then you end up being able to raise sponsorships for the event. And when you combine that with somebody else's event, then you don't get to collect the sponsorships. And so if you want it to be an ongoing program that gets funded, you have to look at what the mechanisms are for funding it. I fund it through ticket sales and sponsorships. And so you'll have to figure out how you pay for the staff time to do all of the background work.
And on my end, I don't worry about that. I just fund my stuff all through investors and spend as little money as possible so that most of their money is going to the companies. We have slightly different styles of running things.
Actually, the TechFest organizer allows us to call the sponsorship for our. They just provide like a ground for us to host the conference, and we can call for the sponsorship, and they don't limit any sponsorship any like kind of activities. Like they just provide the ground, so we can do it in our way.
Yeah, it's whether or not the potential sponsors are already writing a check for TechFest. And so anyone who's doing that is probably not going to write a check to you too at the same time. But it also depends on how much attention that takes away. Here in Seattle, we have a week-long event series called Startup Week. One time, the demo day week of Fledge could correspond, right? I had a choice, and I decided to make them match up. And our attendance was down about, normally back then it was like 160, and I think we had 120. And that's because there were 100 other events going on in the city. So demo day was just one more event as opposed to unique among that week. So grabbing attention gets hard. Okay, speaking of calendars and whatnot, the other homework assignment was to try and put together a draft calendar on when you think you'd start this program. Again, as John said, assuming it's 6 months from the time you say it's launched to the time there is that final presentation. No matter what form you take, no matter what form you do, that's probably about right. So has anybody taken a swag at that yet?
Actually, in terms of timeline, we will start the uh, funding training for the startup in July. Um, this time we will do it online because recently in Vietnam there's a lot of workshop for the startup and they don't like joining any kind of workshop like this. So we plan to do it online and we will complete the curriculum for funding training in June and start the funding training for startup in July. Còn về angel content, angel meetup thì
We also have a kind of angel meetup or kind of workshop to gather the angels in maybe in August.
and then we will have the angel conference in TechFest in maybe in November, at the end of November.
So it's we run from September to November will be our round for this year. We're starting our workshops in 2 weeks, and so then we will meet every Tuesday from June 25th all the way till the 15th of November. But that's assuming that we have a pattern in place and we already know where we're getting our investors from. We had our first investor meeting 2 weeks ago in terms of starting the conversation of pulling investors in. So I suspect it's going to take you longer to find those investors than the timeline that you provided, unless.
Well, I just want to double check. Are we talking 2019 or 2020?
2019.
Oh, okay.
So
And what is there a and if I remember right for you guys, your drop dead date, your holiday season is Lunar New Year, right? You got to finish by end of January.
Lunar New Year in maybe in February 2020.
Okay, so you don't have solar New Year in the way. It's not a big holiday.
We only take 1 or 2 days off in the solar New Year. But
Okay,
for the Lunar New Year, maybe it's from 9 days off.
9 days. Okay, but you really got to be finished before then.
Yeah. But from the solar New Year to solar New Year to Lunar New Year, people like they stand still and don't want to work anymore.
They don't want to work. They just want to prepare for something kind of holiday, a big holiday of the year.
Oh, so it's really a month of slowdown. Kind of, so the same as here. We get a month of slowdown too. It's from last week in November through the end of the year. Okay, and over in the Philippines, what's your draft calendar looking like?
So we're finishing all the legal stuff by end of the month, and the whole schedule for all the and all the content for the investor education piece, like all the things we need. And then we're hoping to start by so there's two arguments. One is we start by end of the third quarter. The problem is, like similar to you, no one works anymore beginning November. Well, basically September 1, but really November, all the way through mid-January. So we're looking to push it back to end of January or early Feb next year, and get all the details ironed out by year end.
And that gives you the room to do the recruitment of the new investors over the fall.
Right.
Yeah, I think that'd be useful.
Yeah. And we're also doing a little more research with regard to like all these potential investors and their profiles, because we have to figure out like who we're really targeting and what those kinds of groups look like in terms of risk appetite, education level, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that seems reasonable. And a few seminars ago, we talked about the potential of using one of these scheduled times to pull in investors and have John and I do a webinar for them. So that sounds like it fits in with the KISS startup timeframe that you're trying to work against. And maybe it's a little early for exchange, but that doesn't hurt to bring in some investors early. Oh, by the way, Sankalita wrote in. She's on Slack channel. She's got the flu, so she wanted to join in but couldn't. And trying to remember her name from one to the world in Myanmar wrote me an email. So I thought she was going to join us tonight, but apparently not. So we probably have 4 groups that are interested in launching this thing. And so the question to the 2 that are on the call here is, should we use the next seminar to make that a webinar to bring in some of your potential angels? Would you think that useful?
I think it would be useful for me, but might be a little too early. If you're holding it for another team, I'd love to sit in.
Yeah, we can do it again later too, and we will record it. But the question is, if you found someone and it was way early, but they were excited about it, they might actually be able to help you, work through some of the details, or at least help find more investors by the end of the year.
Okay, good idea. I'll bring it up with the team.
So sorry, John, because our internet is unstable. So can you repeat the questions or?
Yeah, except it was loony, but yeah. So the question is, should we use the next scheduled seminar we have is July 15th. Should we use that scheduled time for John and I? Should we open that up to as many angels as you want to bring, and have John and I run a "Here's what angel investing is about" webinar for them? We have basically, we have, just to be clear, we have 2 more seminars scheduled back before we knew when anyone was launching anything.
Yeah, and now we have 2 potential angels that we will reach to them, and we will try to tell them can them join with us on the next seminar. Yeah.
Well, if we're going to do it, so I'm looking for a go or no go here. If we do it, then we will, I guess we'll make an Eventbrite or some equivalent online notification. We'll call it the webinar for the Frontier Angel Accelerator. We'll make the content focused on them, not on you guys.
Yeah.
And we'll bring a topic that is of use to new angel investors, including describing in vague details what the program's going to be about, because we haven't nailed down all the details yet. But use it as a chance to try and get some champions to join in.
Yeah, right.
And so when I recently did the Angel Conference in 3 other cities besides Seattle, and the process of doing that, our focal point was to gather 3 evangelists, angels at the core, who were willing to commit to the first 3 programs as the lead investors. And so you might look for those evangelist angels that want to see the ecosystem liven up a little bit, and see if those would be the ones that you can recruit to the conversation.
Okay, I'm just taking a note on this. I'm actually posting it on the Slack channel for everyone to see. What are we calling these? These are not threads. These are on this. All right, what else do we need to cover tonight? Did anyone have anything else?
I don't have additional questions from my end.
I wonder about resources like David Rose's Angel Investing book or other things like that that have been translated. I understand it's been translated to Vietnamese. Does it need to be translated in the Philippines?
Do all professionals speak English, and you just use English everything, or do we need to worry about language?
Everyone speaks English.
Cool.
Oh, I have a question. So, do we need to prepare any information or document to prepare for the next seminar for the investor?
Well, you got the ongoing homework to figure out the legal structure, which you already knew that. What I'll do is I'll send around an invitation for this webinar. So I'll work with John to nail down exactly what the topic is and how to describe it. And then we'll send it around on the Slack channel for you guys to have feedback on what it should say. To me, whenever I do an event, I make an Eventbrite, even if it's free. So I'll make an Eventbrite page for it. That way we'll know who joins in. It's going to be open to all 18 participants in the Frontier Incubator program if they want to bring in angels as well. And so beyond that, there's nothing else. You guys won't be speaking on the next seminar. We'll be presenting.
Yeah.
And if they have questions specifically, well, you'll be speaking if your angels have questions we can't answer that you're better, in case they're asking specific questions about your country. But otherwise, let's just keep making progress on legal structures. And when I do this for my programs, I usually like bring out a calendar and start putting dates down. And I always work backwards. It's like I got to finish by 2 weeks before Lunar New Year. Therefore, you work backwards on how many weeks it's going to be and how many weeks that next thing is going to be and so forth. And then you actually see whether or not starting June 17th works or whether you needed to start May 17th.
Okay.
So if you guys can get that draft down to that level of on this day we're doing this step and then post that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll do it.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah. Not yet.
All right, and then there will be one more seminar a week or two after that one. We'll do the last lingering questions there. And then what's on our schedule that we promised DFAT was then one-on-one conversations, but we'll probably just, we'll figure out a way to schedule those times. And what I still don't think I have word back from Will and Avery that we were going to extend those past the September 15th deadline that they originally gave us. So I still need to hear back from them on how we're supposed to agree to do that, since everything was supposed to be wrapped up by September, but no one's going to be done by September here. Okay. If nothing else, I'll give you back 12 minutes of your life.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Luni.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
day.
Lee. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
You too. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you.